Welcome children. In today's class, we are going to continue the chapter, the address from the book, The Snapshot, page number 12. So in the last class, we had studied how the writer has a failed attempt to visit Mrs. Darling's house because she is not able to recognize her. Now, my mother seemed to notice that I was not entirely convinced. She looked at me reprovingly, and after that we spoke no more about it. Now, the writer is saying that her mother knew that the writer was not convinced at giving away all their precious belongings to Mrs. Darling. And she says that both mother and daughter did not talk much about this matter. Reprovingly means disapprovingly. Meanwhile, I had arrived at the station without having paid much attention to things on the way. I was walking in familiar places again for the first time since the war. But I did not want to go further than was necessary. I did not want to upset myself with the sight of streets and houses full of memories from a precious time. Now the writer is saying that she's going back to the station, and she was saying that it was a familiar place. Why was it familiar? Because it was a hometown. Before the war, she was staying there only, and she had spent her childhood days in that place, and many childhood memories about her family were associated with that place. And she's saying that I didn't want to upset myself. Why didn't she want to upset herself? Means here she's saying that she had very good memories of this place, but now that her family is no more, she is feeling sad. And when she sees these things, she was remembering her family. So she said that she did not want to upset her anymore. In the train back, I saw Mrs. Darling in front of me again as I had the first time I met her. It was the morning after the day my mother had told me about her. I had got up late, and coming downstairs, I saw my mother about to see someone out, a woman with a broad back. Now, sitting in the train, the writer was recalling the day when Mrs. Darling came to her house. The first day when the writer met Mrs. Darling. She said that she woke up and she saw downstairs. And what did she see? She saw that her mother was seeing some lady with a broad back. She was none other than Mrs. Darling. And her mother said, "There is my daughter," said my mother. She beckoned to me. And beckoning means to give a hand gesture, like hi. And the writer is saying that she was introduced to Mrs. Darling by her mother. The woman nodded and picked up the suitcase under the coat rack. She wore a brown coat and a shapeless hat. So, Mrs. Darling, she had a broad back, and she was wearing a brown coat and a shapeless hat. So, when the writer sees her, she was carrying a very big suitcase, and which was filled with the things, and it was very difficult for her to carry. "Does she live far away?" I asked, seeing the difficulty she had going out of the house with the heavy suitcase. "In Marconi Street," said my mother, number 46. Remember that. So the writer inquires from her mother, "Where does this lady live?" So the mother says that she lives nearby at Marconi Street, number 46. This is the time when the writer comes to know about the address of Darling. I had remembered it, but I had waited a long time to go there. Initially, after the liberation, I was absolutely not interested in all those stored stuff. Liberation means after the war ended. And stored stuff. Now stuff means all the materials, things which were kept in Darling's house and which belonged to the writer's mother. Now, the writer is saying after the war ended, Initially, she showed no interest in seeing her things, and naturally, I was also rather afraid of it. Afraid of being confronted means coming face to face. Now, the writer was saying that she was also afraid to see the things that had belonged to a connection that no longer exists. She says that she was afraid to see these things. Which things? The things which belong to her mother. Because when she would be seeing these things, she would definitely remember her mother, who is no more, which were hidden away in cupboards and boxes and waited in vain until they were put back in their place again, which had endured all those years because they were things. Now, the writer is telling all these things were waiting in the cupboards. They were waiting for the master. Who was the master of these things? Her mother. Her mother would come and take back her things. But in vain, alas, her mother was no more. So, the things they were put and they were suffering inside the cupboard because they were non-living things. So the things which were associated with her mother, they were just lying inside the cupboard. But gradually everything became more normal again. Bed was getting to be lighter color. There was a bed you could sleep in under curtain, a room with a view you were more used to glancing at each day. And one day I noticed I was curious about all the possessions that must still be at that address. I wanted to see them, touch, remember. So one fine day, the writer, she became very anxious and curious. She wanted to see all her things, and now that the war is over, there was peace, there was tranquility everywhere, there was no fear of anything, fear of bombs and all. The writer decides to go and visit the place and see all the belongings and all the things of her mother. After my first visit in vain to Mrs. Darling's house, I decided to try a second time. So, first time when she goes, Mrs. Darling doesn't entertain her. So, she gives a second try. So, when she goes second time to her house, see what happens. Now, a girl of about 15 opened the door to me. I asked her if her mother was at home. No, she said, my mother's doing an errand. No matter, I said, I will wait for her. The second time, when the writer visits Mrs. Darling's house, what does she see? She sees a 15-year-old girl, probably the daughter of Mrs. Darling. She opens the door. Now, the writer inquires whether her mother is there. At this, the daughter replies that she has gone doing an errand. Errand means doing various jobs, other works. So the writer says, no problem, I'll be waiting for her. I followed the girl along the passage. An old-fashioned iron Hanukkah candle holder hung next to a mirror. We never used it because it was much more cumbersome than a single candlestick. Now, as the writer enters the house in the passage, what does she see? She sees a candle stand, an old candle stand which belonged to her mother, was hanging on the wall. And the writer says that they never use this candle stand. Won't you sit down? Asked the girl. She had opened the door of the living room and I went inside past her.